yes, we all want to progress, but it hasn't got to be a relentless pursuit of progression day in, day out, hour by hour.
You have to sort of manage your expectations and go, actually, what is realistic progression at that time? Sometimes realistic progression at that time is staying the same for a little bit, and that's okay.
I think this idea that we need to be doing certain things, need to look a certain way, is something we also just really need to get away from.
The media, social media, we kind of get fed this idea of what progress or results sort of should look like, and then we kind of think we all need to work towards that, but it's not always the case. Hardly ever is the case.
Hello and welcome to the T2 Fit Talks podcast, where we aim to educate and inspire individuals to achieve their full potential. I am your host JT, and today in episode 3 we're going to be talking about progression, what it is, what you should be looking for, how best to track it, and hopefully we'll highlight some areas that maybe you haven't considered before. To do that, we are joined by T2 Fit's very own Amy Darch. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks.
It's nice to actually sit down and have a chat with you, because like the last, 3-4 weeks, I've barely seen you.
Passing ships.
Literally, it's been manic.
Both on the treadmill. Not literally.
Not literally, definitely not literally. How was your weekend?
Very good, quite chilled actually.
Yeah?
Which is like a nice welcome change. More importantly, I shouldn't ask you questions because you're the host, but how was your weekend? More eventful than mine.
My weekend was an interesting one. It was very good. We took 11 members to a 3-peak challenge, which was an amazing experience. It really, really was. Actually hadn't been to those kind of parts of Scotland, Wales and England, but stunning views. It was great actually just to get some members who would never normally do that kind of thing out and doing it. And I guess that kind of comes into what we're going to talk about in terms of progression. Kind of seeing that progression in them was amazing. Even to the point where some of them, even 3 months ago, were like, can I even do this? Is it even possible? I would never normally sign up for this. So to see that and be there and help them through that was, it was great. So a really nice time. Less fun, as I've told a few of you already, about the bus. The bus journey on the 24 hours in between was interesting. There were some interesting smells developed. One at a service station at about 3 a.m, which actually no one knows still what it was. But it was...
What kind of smell was it?
It was a mix of petrol and fish. And we still have no idea what it is. And we almost don't want to know about what it is now. All we know is that when the thing was moving, it was better. So like this... The driver was filling this thing up and we had to get it moving. It's like, mate, this is really bad. Let's get going. So apart from the smell, actually the experience, the views, the physical challenge of it was fantastic. Amazing. So yeah, it was great. It was
amazing.
Great. Legs are tired, but they're okay. So we'll take it.
Love that.
So we're going to talk about progression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite when we sat down and started to speak about it, it's quite an interesting, quite a broad topic. So trying to delve into specifics is quite tricky, but I guess the first thing is, what would you say progression is? If you had to kind of define it, what would you say it is?
I think it's the pursuit of working towards something, and then the actual noticing or seeing maybe physical or maybe mental changes in the pursuit of that goal. Mm-hmm.
So I think the physical side of it is something that jumps out straight away, because typically when we think about, I think when we think about progress, especially in a gym environment, mm-hmm. It is very much about, am I lifting heavier? Am I doing this faster, running for longer? But the mental side of it, that's something that gets underplayed, I think, quite a lot. And obviously we do a lot here with training books and stuff to kind of track data, which is an important part of it. I think the psychological side, the mental side, is something that people should be focusing on a lot more. Mm-hmm. What kind of mental things, like psychological kind of things, do you think people should be looking out for when it comes to progression?
I think it's an interesting one. I think it's also something that people won't be able to experience unless they actually experience it. They've got to kind of go through the journey themselves. But I think, feeling more confident both in the gym, but then that translates to the rest of your life. Just the ability to kind of put yourself in uncomfortable situations mm-hmm. in the gym. Again, that transcends to the rest of your life. Having just a bit of consistency, discipline, structure, I think are all areas where I think people can lack in the rest of their life. And again, that impacts, family life, work life. I think it's multifaceted. There's so many areas where you can kind of feel better. And then that can, from the gym and training, and then that has a positive impact into other areas of your life, for sure.
Yeah. And what kind of things have you used in the past, like for things that you've worked on, whether it be challenges, your own training? How have you tracked and monitored your progression?
I think it's an interesting one. I think, and we'll probably get onto this, but I've been training for like a relatively long amount of time. Obviously, there's people who've been training for like 30 years. But I think initially my progress was all about trying to, because I'd got into strength training, it was definitely all about numbers in the gym and improving lifts, getting more competent, getting stronger. And that was great. And I saw loads of progress. And then it kind of got to a point where I wouldn't say I got itchy feet, but I kind of was like, I wanted something a little bit more, especially because I'm probably just not going to be like a world champion powerlifter ever. Bad genes. Yeah, maybe. But I think and also it was a bit of timing. I had some really good friends around me that were doing lots of different events, competitions, and they just kind of got me involved. And so I kind of got swept along with them, but in a really positive way. And then before you know it, I was always training then to work towards something. So, 3 to 6 months, sometimes even less warning than that, I would have a goal in mind that I was working towards. I would train specifically for that. I would, have an outcome, which was how well I did in that said performance or event. And then I could work better or work harder to get better at it. So I think for me, that was really important and still is to this day. It gives me that kind of focus and makes me feel like I'm progressing in something.
And within that, how much did you delve into the actual numbers side of it? Like with the weights that you were lifting, the amount of times per week, like all that kind of stuff, the data side. Did you get really in deep with it, really in tune with it? Or was it just a case of, I feel stronger, I'm lifting a bit heavier, everything's going in the right direction, then that's okay?
Initially a bit of that latter bit, like I just started training. I was didn't really know what I was doing. Similar story to a lot of people. And also you start training, you do a little bit and you get some quite good results. The whole newbie gains, it is a thing. But then I think as soon as I started working with a coach and had my programs laid out, the volume was managed, how I was meant to work and what intensity I was meant to do in that session was managed. I was then able to track properly and then look back at that data and make more progression along the way. So I think having a coach was really key in noticing that progress and making sure that it was properly structured. And
it's interesting you mentioned that. So when you had a coach on board, someone was looking after it a bit for you, they actually managed the load, the volume and the intensity. And I'm guessing to a certain extent, sometimes that was pushing him, really trying to ramp things up. But probably quite often just telling you to pull back a little bit and celebrate the smaller wins and just see small linear gains, I guess. Would that be true to say?
Massively. And I think if anyone knows me and knows what I'm like, my energy as well,
I
always do. I'm always a bit that kind of too much person anyway. And so I remember when I had my first coach, and it sounds bad, I used to sneakily do extra sessions that he didn't know I was doing because I was always so excited to train. I always wanted to train or jump into someone's session if they were doing, it didn't matter that I'd just done heavy sets of deadlifts. It's like, let's do a ridiculous conditioning workout because I just love doing it. But he always tempered me and he's like, look, you're telling me you want to improve your deadlift and your squat and your bench, yet you're doing all this extra crap that isn't working, helping you work towards that goal. What do you actually want to do here? If you want to get stronger, and you actually do, then let's just maybe get rid of some of this extra fluff that you're doing. So that was always a really hard place to be in for me because I always just wanted to and you think at the time more is more, if I train more, if I lift weights more times a week, if I do more conditioning sessions, I'm just going to get better. But that is not really the case. And I'm now probably at a stage after many more years of training more, I'm probably doing the least amount of actual training that I've done for the last 5 years, but I wouldn't say it's impacted my results at all. If anything, I'm probably a bit stronger.
I think it's the general consensus that to progress you must be just doing more all the time. And actually that's one of the biggest learning curves I think I've had in my own training, but also as a coach. The less is more, and the quality of work and the intensity that you can put into 5 or 6 exercises is always going to trump 2 or 3 sessions a day for the most part, for most people, unless you are, as you said, training for something very specific that requires you to do multiple sessions or activities in a day. A few things that you've mentioned there kind of come back into goals, essentially goal setting. And this is something that we mentioned before when we sat down. So to see progress, quite often you need somewhere to go and something to measure. So when we think about goals, you know, the old kind of acronym of SMART goals, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and kind of time framed. So how important do you think setting a benchmark, setting a goal out is important for you to kind of see the progression?
I think it is like crucial.
Yeah.
Because there's that old saying, what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. Like, how would you know if you never wrote anything down in your logbook, if you didn't even know what you thought you might wanted to work on? How would you know whether you're actually getting closer to that point? And it can be on anything. You know, that specific goal could be about anything.
Yeah.
Whether you want to get quicker at your 5K, you want to get 100 kilo deadlift, you actually just want to be pain free. Like, there's many different ways you could look at that goal, but I think you have to have a goal in mind to know whether what you're doing is being productive and being beneficial to get towards that goal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's paramount.
So that comes into like the specific side, I guess. So like you say, having something set in stone where you know, okay, this is where I currently am, this is where I want to be, and it's just trying to figure out the steps in between that, which is, you know, sometimes where a coach comes into play. The measurable side of it is things like using your logbooks, for example. So really delving into the numbers. I did this last week. It felt like this. Therefore, I'm going to try and do this week. But again, it's not always having to increase, not always looking to jump up. There's a number of factors that come into that. So, you know, we think about Steve, whoever Steve may be, comes into the gym who's had a horrendous day at work. Do you need to be looking to strive for that extra 1-2 kilos on a deadlift? Probably not. And we see it quite a lot. I think it's important for people to understand that progress is a longer time frame. It isn't always about just having a really quick, like, I need to do more today, do more. I think that comes into the kind of attainable and realistic side of the SMART goals. When you start to outline what that actually looks like, is it realistic for me to do what I want to do in the time frame that I'm going to set out? And am I doing it in an attainable way? So if I want to put, I don't know, let's say my current deadlift is 60 kilos, which probably isn't far from the truth at the moment, and I want to get 100 kilos in 2 weeks, if I have no background, it's very unlikely I'm going to do that. Just doing more and more deadlifting isn't going to help me out. It's going to burn my central nervous system out. It's not a clever way of doing it. So I do think a lot of it comes back into setting realistic expectations nice and early, and having coaches around does definitely help that. What other things do you think people should be looking out for in the gym other than just numbers?
Oh, there's so many things. I think people really underestimate, firstly, moving well and being adept at the skill that you're doing, because that really sets the foundation for everything that you're doing. I think I could probably cringe if I look back at videos of me 5 years ago deadlifting, and my numbers are probably not majorly different. I'm probably lifting a similar amount, maybe like 10 kilos more or something, but I look better now doing a deadlift than I did back then. So I think don't underestimate moving well, because you'll be using the right muscles, you'll be able to understand your body and get that feedback, rather than just kind of, you know, ripping weight from the floor.
I think it also comes into longevity.
Yeah.
Like massively.
Not breaking your back.
Exactly. Like, rather than like going that extra 20 kilos heavier, it's like, we'll move that one really well with the right intent, the right intensity.
Yeah.
You'll get a good stimulus today, but also you're going to be able to come back in a few days' time or next week and do that again and better again, rather than I now can't deadlift for 2 or 3 weeks because I hurt my back.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think and the other things around like posture and being pain-free from training, that is a really good marker of progress. We see quite a lot of people come in, don't we, with sort of like chronic back pain or, you know, issues around their shoulder and their hips, and coming in and actually getting rid of those problems. So that's got to be a real marker of progression for sure.
Well, so you had a bad back injury, right? So you slipped a disc when you were training.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
So this is me jumping around from many competitions to competitions. I was training for like an amateur strongwoman competition, and I went down to the gym that I was going to be doing the competition at, and one of the events was to flip this tire as many times as you could in a minute. And so I went there, lifted it fine. It was okay. Did a few reps, but then did it under those time conditions, and it went, and it was very painful. But I think it was my first humbling experience because, I'd started training and, you get these gains and you get stronger and everything's kind of going up and up and up. And then all of a sudden it's like,
plateau.
Bit more than a plateau.
Well, yeah.
Bit of
at that point,
a bit of a dent in your kind of armor, thinking like, I'm actually not just always getting better and always seeing progression. It was really humbling. But it actually taught me a lot. It taught me more around the side of rehab, looking after your body, having real empathy with people that had injuries and kind of helping them manage that. So I think it was and it kind of made me take a bit of a backseat, look at other areas of my training and sort of build up again from the bottom. So yeah,
Can you remember what the first kind of few weeks looked like training wise for you after doing your back? I mean, obviously I'm guessing there was a period of recovery where it was a bit of rest time, but when you started getting back into the gym, like, could you even see light at the end of the tunnel with the whole rehabilitation? Like, what did it initially look like?
Yeah, not initially. I think what saved me was that I was actually coaching in a gym. So I was not having to sit at a desk all day, which, would have compressed my spine and probably been way more uncomfortable. So the fact that I was like moving around and walking was actually a really positive thing. But yeah, training was really slow. And I think as well, mentally it affects you because you think, it's like really hurt my back, and you kind of think the worst. So then when you get back to training, you're not kind of quite as up for like really pushing it. It took a little while to kind of get back to where I was before. But yeah, I did so much core rehab. Like I had a really strong core off the back of it because I just knew the importance of it.
Yeah, I've done obviously a fair bit of work kind of on the rehabilitation side with various people on a one-to-one basis as well as group. But I think when you have an injury, again, it's managing the expectations nice and early. Like that return to wherever they were, I think they think, a couple of weeks is going to be very linear. It's going to be like, I'll just get better each day. When actually the realistic side of that is going to be so up and down. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. You're going to have a day where you think, I could go back and do whatever I was doing before. But then days, maybe the next day, it's like, I've really done something an issue here again. I think with injuries in particular, don't expect to kind of get out of pain, discomfort right away. Try and encourage movement as much as possible. Be sensible with it. But progression for a lot of people would be, I can do a little bit more than I could before, but it might also be with the same discomfort that I had. I think that's the thing that throws people. It's like, I'm still in pain, but I'm now doing a squat with a 5 kg goblet position as opposed to a box squat. So although you still have discomfort there, you still have the progression because you're able to do more with that same discomfort, if that makes sense. I think that injury and postural stuff as well. Like we're obviously in a day and age now where posture is not ideal, it's not great. And that comes back into your thing that you mentioned a minute ago about moving just really, really well. Also managing expectations. If someone comes into the gym or if you're that person with really bad posture and it's like, I want that 200 kg deadlift. It's like, well, are there things that we could maybe sort out before that? And just moving that weight a bit better, moving yourself better day to day, waking up in the morning, less aches, less pains, being able to move around, play with your kids without hurting yourself. I think they're things that are really underplayed and just skipped over a lot of the time. And if people start to be more aware of those and celebrate those small wins, I think it will be very powerful for people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also I think going back to that injury point as well, and it can relate to other areas of their life, doesn't have to be around injury, but almost like a setback kind of thing. I think people just focus on the training in the gym and discount all the other things that are going on in their life that could impact that. Like you said, taking a few steps back with an injury, like, have you just driven from 5 hours from Manchester. That's probably why you're feeling, you know, a bit more in pain today. So it's like looking at the rest, or stress going on in the rest of their life, having a look at that and understanding a bit more wider context around what could be impacting you doing certain things in the gym, I think is massive. And I think when you first start out in the industry, I know I didn't have any appreciation for that whatsoever, but going through life a little bit more and seeing more people and, you know, more kind of things going on, I have a much better appreciation for that. And I think when people start to understand, okay, gym's in the context to the rest of your life and so many other things that are going on, it helps you manage what's going on in here a little bit better as well.
Oh, completely. I think the stuff outside the gym was something, when I first started out as a trainer, I didn't give it any respect. It wasn't even something that I was really truly aware of. And, you know, people that I've spoken to in the past know that when I first started coaching, it was very militant, and it was very much, because that's the kind of background that I had with the rugby and sport and stuff. It was like, you turn up, you break yourself essentially. If you don't feel sick, something's not working, blah, blah, blah. But actually, I started to realize someone even just turning up to the gym that day and being around people, doing 30 minutes, walking on a treadmill, having the confidence to go into this area of the gym that maybe they haven't done before, they were just huge areas of progress for people. And it was a world that I just never gave any credit to. But when I started to see it, it was so powerful. Like just having, especially female clients, I can't go in that weights area, it's the men's area.
Yeah.
It's like, but then seeing them go in there on their own with their own programs and kind of break those barriers was amazing. Mm-hmm. Have you had things like that with kind of members and stuff in the past?
Yeah, definitely. I think the whole thing around confidence, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on it, probably this one coming up, who knows. But just having the confidence in yourself to go and do things that you didn't think you'd be able to do, whether that's going into the weights area in a gym or signing up for an event that you didn't think, you know, 3 peaks that would be possible before. Mm-hmm. And once they do that and they overcome those challenges, it's just such a positive impact in the rest of their life. And I think us as coaches, we have such a big part to play in building their confidence, because I think if they trust us, then they're going to kind of be more inclined to try new things and to get a little bit more out of their comfort zone. And this is why this community is so great, because they're all sort of doing that for each other as well.
I think it also has I know it has a positive impact on the family around them as well. If we think about Maria here, who just did TBT, one of our programs that we run over 12 weeks, the impact that it had on her was great, but also just the impact that it had, the positive kind of progress, I say you could class it as progress for the rest of her family. So I think her husband started to, you know, train and move more. Her kids saw their mum do something that she hadn't really done before, and they were really proud of her. I think that in itself is massive, is huge progress. And I think, again, just taking a step back and trying to look at the bigger picture around that is huge. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely. What do you think progress would look like for someone when let's say they've never trained before, when they initially step into a gym, whether it be here, whether it be in a coached setting, whether it be on their own? What things should they be, I guess, doing, but also just looking out for in terms of progression?
Yeah, I think it really depends where what their starting point is at, right? So if they're a real novice and they haven't actually really done much training before, I think when they come into the gym, getting a sense of body awareness, like where their body is actually moving in space, and then honing on the skills that you need to lift well, that is like fundamental, like tick if you can do that. And once you do that, you'll probably notice that the weight increases quite quickly at the beginning, just because of your relative strength and the ability of the muscles to, you know, go through protein synthesis quicker. That happens at the beginning. So I think that it's not uncommon to see someone come into the gym once they can move. We get into a point where they can move pretty well. They will start to see progression in terms of the weights that they're lifting go up quite quickly. Yeah. And then from a cardio capacity point of view as well, once they've kind of got a base level of capacity in their system, then again you can tap into higher intensities and you'll be able to get longer periods of endurance going. So I think that progress happens pretty quickly at the beginning when somebody comes in. And unfortunately, it does kind of start to, I mean, yeah, it's inevitable. It starts to slow, but there's other areas that you can find progression. But in terms of actual weights, I mean, we would all be lifting 500 kilos otherwise if progress kept happening at that rate as when you started. So that would be lovely, but it's not going to happen for a lot of people.
It's definitely not. And like you say, it depends on the journey and kind of where they are, where they start that journey. But, you know, for someone who has never really stepped foot in a gym before, it could even just be the frequency that they attend. So, like, you know, I really can't
mention that point.
No, but there's like
consistency.
But yeah, just I guess it's, you know, for someone who is, you know, extremely busy with work, stressful, whatever it may be, I haven't got time for that. I can't do that. But actually getting to that gym even just once a week, or getting outside, maybe it's not even the gym, but it's getting out for a walk that maybe you wouldn't normally do. Doing just that one thing, that one little step, is a quote that I cannot remember where it come from. It's about, it's a really very bad analogy, but there's a guy in some woods. It's really, really foggy, and he was like, I have no idea where to go. It's like someone said to him, can you see what your next step is? He was like, yeah. He was like, take that one.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes sense.
I've had that one, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from though, but it was good because it was like, I don't know exactly where I'm going to go yet, but I can do the next bit, and it's just that one step, and let's do that, and then I kind of see where I go. So it could just be like getting out for a walk. It could be moving from one gym session to 2 gym sessions every week, and just taking those small steps, small wins, bit by bit, and like you said, finding the consistency element. Even if you're not increasing your weights, just having that volume increase, that, I guess, a lifestyle change it comes into, because that's going to impact massively on what your outlook is on everything else. As you mentioned, relationships, kind of family, what I do at work on a day-to-day basis, how early I get up, how early I go to bed, what foods I start eating. It has that one small step can have a real positive knock-on effect. The training side, as you said, might start to plateau a little bit, but the positivity around that can be huge.
Yeah, definitely. But even as you go through, and I say about plateauing, it's maybe if you look in a crude sense of just the weight, they're not jumping up in the increments that they were, you know, when you first started. But there's so many other ways to even, you know, you can always refine your form, and if you can move better, and if you can utilize more muscles and in the right way, then you're going to get, you know, probably more muscle growth, and you're going to get stronger in that way. And you can also, we always talk about generating intensity, like it's easier to do that when you've been training for a bit longer and you can understand your body a bit more and sort of how to push it. So I think that the progression is, I mean, it's a never-ending journey in here. I'm still very far off many of the dumbbells. There's like so many more that I need to tap into. So I think that whilst the progress changes, it doesn't necessarily, you know, it doesn't ever stop.
So just quick, there's an interesting point. Like you just said there's a number of dumbbells that I need to get to.
Did I say need?
Yeah. but it's an interesting point though, because I think a lot of people, they feel like they need to do certain things as well. I think it's drummed into us, like whether it be social media, people that we see in the gym, whatever. So-and-so is doing that, therefore I need to do that. I need to be chasing. And actually it's just not the case. It might not align with where you want to go and what you want to do. But actually, I'm really okay if you do more chin-ups than me, which is good because it will happen. I don't need to be doing that. It's not something I need to be stressing over. There's other things that, you know, I want to focus on and work on. I think this idea that we need to be doing certain things, need to look a certain way, is something we also just really need to get away from.
Yeah, I think that really ties into the goal setting side of it as well, and like making that goal personal to you and something that you actually want to do. Because I think a lot of the time, I mean, we even have it with our members here. Sometimes I sit down with them for a one-to-one review and they're like, what do you think I should do? What should be my goal? And that kind of defeats the purpose, because the purpose should be like what actually matters to you. It needs to be something that means something to you so you can actually put a bit of effort in to work towards it. But I think, like you said, with the media, social media, we kind of get fed this idea of what progress or results sort of should look like, and then we kind of think we all need to work towards that. But it's not always the case. Hardly ever is the case. Which is why progress is just so unique to everyone.
Indeed. So let's say we have newbie in the gym, they're 6 weeks in, they've had some really good success over those 6 weeks, as we said, quite a steep progression kind of curve. They start to hit that plateau. What kind of things would you say they could start to have a look at to overcome that plateau and start to move forward again?
Yeah, I mean, the training in the gym is just one element of it. And I think like we also, when people first come in, because you don't want to layer on too much for people as well, it can be quite a lot to change a lot in your lifestyle. So we really focus on the training initially for members that come in. But then I think it's looking around other things that are going on in your life. So noticing how much, stress and sleep. I was trying to combine the two together. Stress and sleep can have a huge impact on your results in the gym. And one I underestimated for way too many years. Nutrition, if you have got like more of an aesthetic goal and you do want to change your body composition, that's definitely something that, I mean, you could have the perfect training plan and you could, do everything you need to do in the gym, but ultimately, nutrition is a huge part of body composition. So there's lots of other areas to look at outside of here once you get to kind of a certain point. And if you are getting that little bit of a plateau, it's probably about refocusing and looking at what you actually do want to do. And if that is to go around the body composition or doing something else, or you still want to get stronger but you're not, again, what can you look around sleep, stress management, your food to kind of support that? So I think it's just delving that little bit deeper and just getting a little bit more specific with the other stuff that's going on outside of the gym.
Yeah, the sleep and the recovery side is, again, huge. I think any training program is only as good as the one that you can recover from, like the most efficiently.
It's one of my favourite quotes, that.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go, we'll take it. So that definitely comes into it. I think in terms of being in the gym, and it's something that we really try and utilise here in our different kind of training blocks. But you could be doing, let's say at that 6 week mark, you've been doing the same program, things have started to stagnate a little bit. You could start to have a look at changing up the volume a little bit. You could start to have a look at the tempo. As you mentioned earlier about how well can you control it, how much intensity can you put into it. It could even just be starting to tweak. But I had 3 sets here. It's now going to be, 3 sets here. Then I've kind of had a 20-minute rest on my phone. 3 sets here. It's like, well, can I merge those? Can I start working with supersets and trisets? And you can start to play around with little bits and bobs, those variables, just to kind of, you're not doing anything different as such. And it's something that Cass and I spoke about a little bit on episode 2, where you're probably not going to do ridiculously different movements for the rest of your life. But if you can just be really good and tweak and play with the variables on the foundation movements, it's going to take you so far. And it hasn't always got to be this kind of big, sexy change the whole time. So I think it comes down to just small tweaks and enjoying the process. And that's something that you said just before we went on. It's like that process is so key when it comes to progression. And I think more people that can kind of fall in love with that process, and maybe love's quite a strong word, but the more you can love that process, the place you're going to go at the end, the destination is going to be just way better.
Yeah, definitely. And like, no one is the finished article like that. Yeah. How amazing is that? Some people might find that frustrating. I think that's amazing. Yeah. Like there's always work to be done, and you can always shift the focus. So if you're kind of feeling like you're a little bit stuck in the rut, then you have a slightly different event or a slightly different competition that sort of just changes the focus and gets you working closer to something else. So there's just so many ways that you can take it, that it's just, it's never ending in a good way. Yeah,
absolutely. But I also think it's okay sometimes to not be looking for progression, if you see what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, yes, we all want to progress, but it hasn't got to be a relentless pursuit of progression day in, day out, hour by hour. You will have times in your life where things get too much and you need to spend more time at home with family or on work or whatever it may be. That progress in certain elements might need to take a bit of a backseat, which is really okay. If you look at an Olympian, for example, it's quite a far-fetched way of looking at it, but they build to a certain point. So they look to peak at a certain point. There's always things that happen within that period. think about the Olympics, you've got 4 years, it's peak, slowly. But there's going to be a time where they have to then just chill before they go again. And I think not quite on that scale, but we should start to do that a little bit as well. It's not always just burn the candle at both ends. It's like, okay, I need to take a bit of chill time.
Yeah.
I feel shattered, numbers have stagnated. Maybe that's because I've hit my plateau. A little bit of structured recovery and chill time away from chasing progression all the time could be just the thing that I need to then really kind of ignite that passion for it again.
Yeah, and definitely. And I also think looking at, again, we talked about what's going on in the rest of your life, but if you do want to keep seeing progression in the gym, it's not always going to be viable. You know, what if you've got a crazy period of work coming up and, you know, your sleep has suffered, you're getting 3 hours sleep and you've got all these meetings and presentations and you're really stressed. It's probably unattainable and unrealistic to think, actually, I can keep adding 5 kilos to my deadlift, which isn't realistic necessarily anyway, but do you see what I mean? And it could be, there can be many other life events that happen around having a baby. You know, you have to sort of manage your expectations and go, actually, what is realistic progression at that time? Yeah. Sometimes realistic progression at that time is staying the same for a little bit, and that's okay. Yeah. Or being injured and taking a few steps back and then building back up again. That's okay. So it's like with many things in life, it's just never linear. It's never going to keep going up and up and up. There's going to be little bumps in the road, but that's fine. And
it also could be, you know, when you've previously had those periods of, you know, really stressful work, whatever it may be, everything shuts down training wise. So that might have been you in the past, but progression could be, actually, I'm going to get up a little bit earlier. I'm going to get outside for 30 minutes, enjoy some sunshine with a morning coffee. That in itself could be progress. It's not anywhere near what you were doing in the gym, but it's progression in terms of what I would normally have done. Like in the past, I've done this, nothing. It's all been very work related. I've become ridiculously stressed. It's impacted my relationships at home. Or actually that 30 minutes outside, hopefully enjoying some sunshine, potentially a bit of fresh air, that's progress in itself. And it might just give you that mental clarity to be better at work that day, spend that extra bit of time with your family or wherever it may be at home that evening. And that, again, just could be the progress that you need. Like you say, nothing to do with being in the gym and the training side, but you become better by doing 30 minutes. It could even be a 10-minute AMRAP of burpees in the bedroom at some point, which sounds horrendous, but you could do that. And it could just be, if you're doing something better, being better than you were before, progress straight away. But it's the mindset thing, right? Yeah,
it helps with that mental resilience is like a massive thing. I think once you start training at the gym, that's a huge skill that you learn, and like we were saying, it transcends to the rest of your life. And if you can learn a bit of toughness and uncomfortableness in the gym, and it's all relative to everyone. I'm not saying that everyone has to do like an extreme challenge to find that uncomfortableness, but just kind of pushing yourself that little bit more in the gym, you know, driving that intensity a little bit will help you then when those situations in life come up and it's a bit tougher and life's a bit more stressful. You kind of go, actually, do you know what? I've got some structure and some discipline in my life now. Let's use that to its full potential so that I can be better in the rest of my life.
Absolutely. So what would, let's say an intermediate, so we'll say like someone who's been training for 1 to 3 years, what might progression look like for them that's maybe a little bit different from someone who is brand new to that journey? What might that look like?
I think it's managing load better. It's able to control tempo better. You're generally more stable. I think if you've been coached, especially as well, in whatever form that might be, having that understanding and awareness of your body, you're just much more in tune with it, so you can respond to cueing a lot better. Like I said, your numbers might not be jumping in the same way that they could have been at the beginning, but that's okay. You find that intensity in different ways, and like you said, with tempo and with stability and many other things. And at that point, maybe you've looked to find a bit more of a specific focus. So maybe when you first come into the gym, it is probably quite hard to pinpoint a goal. You might say that you want to lose a bit of weight and feel a bit fitter, but generally digging a bit deeper or getting more specific than that at the beginning can be a bit more of a challenge. But by the time you've been training for that little bit longer, you might say, actually, do you know what, I really love lifting. I love strength training. So then you might get more specific with the numbers, or you go, do you know what, actually, my back's really sore a lot of the time. So actually, if I can come in and if I can train, I can be pain free, then that's huge for me. But I think by training that little bit longer, you'll have more of awareness of what you want out of it and where it can go. So I think you can just dial in a little bit more and get more focus.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think also at that point, you should have a fairly decent amount of kind of training knowledge, not just on the movement side, but again, around those variables. So using things like the tempo, actually looking at different rest and recovery periods, how you structure your week. You know, if it is more of an aesthetic goal, is it something that I'd start to break my split up a little bit differently to add that little bit of an extra or higher stimulus in? Does the weight need to go up? Does the weight need to come down? What does the volume look like? So I think at that point, it's just starting to use the knowledge side just that little bit more. And like you say, you might start to really double down into, this is where I want to go. It might be that you start to invest in a coach to kind of help you along with that, as you did. And as Kaz actually mentioned quite a lot on this episode 2, having that coach guidance was just invaluable for both of you. But also it could be the time where you start to enter into some bigger challenges, like getting into a high rocks or whatever, like some of the members have done here, which is huge. But I think at that point, it's also just still about being sensible with it. And it's going back and revisiting those SMART goals. Okay, well, I now have my specific thing. How am I going to get there? Is it attainable? What are my realistic steps that I actually start to put in place? And what's my time frame? And I think that if people can look at it in a slow, steady, somewhat, if we can, linear fashion, rather than what I've done in the past, which is why I'm riddled with injuries. I have an event in 6 months' time. Let's get after it like an Olympic athlete in the first 3 days. Don't do that. But if people can look at it as a slower phased approach, and as you said, kind of falling in love with that process more, slowing things down, I think, again, that destinations I mentioned earlier is going to be so much better. And yeah, you're just going to enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well with that, and not jumping too quickly, it's easier to see it in I always think of running as a good example of the setbacks of that if you do things too quickly. Sometimes with lifting, you can't see the negative effects of like jumping too quickly until it's too late and you have got an injury there. But with running, I think it's a good example of a way to see where can you actually manage the volume, and are you increasing that volume, you know, in a reasonable fashion, so that you're not feeling twinges, you're not feeling like your legs just really sore all the time. I think running can be a really good example to see whether you're doing things in a incremental way that's going to get you more progression in the long term, rather than just whacking a load. You know, you've got your place in the marathon, so are you making sure that that's, you know, like a slower increase in volume, rather than just going, I need to run 5 times a week now. I think the lifting side of it, I think that's why it's really great that here we have a program that is really well thought through and managed in a really good way, so that the program's balanced. I think sometimes when people are doing their own thing, just go, too much of certain things, and then that's when injuries can happen as well. So it's safe to build up in a slower way as well.
Yeah. So what about the people that have been in the gym for 5-10 years? How different would that look from like an intermediate through to, let's say, an advanced or a really experienced gym goer? How would you kind of see that as being different?
Well, at that point, I think you would really understand your body. You should really notice it responding to cues and coaching and just feedback that you actually get from training itself. So your movement should be really good. So you should be able to really ramp up intensity. Again, they're not going to be, Cass, you probably haven't added much to your deadlift in the last few years because of the amount of years that you've been training. But I think also people that are really advanced, I say they just love it. They love the process more than anything else, and they're probably much more likely to be on a structured program. You get the odd person in a gym that's just there and you always wonder, what are they actually doing? They've been here for years and not seen any changes. But a lot of people at that point, you know, they are on a structured program because, again, maybe the goals got more specific, or they just love the process. So again, the education side of it, they're wanting to learn more to make their training better. So I think that everything just gets honed a little bit more in that advanced stage, and they'll look for other ways to see progression.
I think, especially if you've been doing it for quite a while, the goal might just really change.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's like, for me, one of the reasons that my deadlift, hasn't gone up, or whatever, my weights haven't gone up, is the reasons for me training have become very different. It was all about sport performance before. I need to be bigger, faster, stronger. I need to be, making sure that when I walk out onto a pitch, I can hold my own. Whereas now, it's really not about that. It's doing enough resistance training to keep me fit, strong, healthy-ish, but then actually turn my attention at the moment more to kind of, the endurance side of things, and still enjoying being in the gym, still lifting some weights, but the progression is elsewhere. I guess the progression is kind of still there in certain elements of, am I able to continue doing the volume of the running, going back to your point, and stay injury free? The resistance side of that is helping me out. So I do think it's the reasons for people training after, being in the gym for quite a long time will and can change. And it could go the other way. It might actually be that they want to get stronger. They started in there just kind of as a social thing, meeting people, and actually now I really want to try and take this to the next level, as you said. But yeah, I think at that stage, you're doing it for a really specific reason, or like you say, you just really love it and it becomes part of just your daily routine, your life. But I think because it becomes so just part of your routine, you do then maybe start to miss out or forget the other little bits in the background. Like, are you still recovering properly? Are you still challenging yourself where you need to? Are you in the gym all the time and actually maybe you shouldn't be? You need to look at your volume, your intensity. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one when you've been there for a long period of time. And I guess I'm getting to that point now.
Yeah, but I think that's why as well, the motivation to progress it goes down different avenues, because once you've been in the gym for a certain amount of time, there's a ceiling that exists from the kind of program that you might be doing. If I did a certain program for 16 weeks, there's going to be only so much progression I can get at that point, and then I kind of need a bit of a different focus. This is a good change for the body anyway, but I think the fact that you've gone down different avenues now over the last few years is probably because it's like, okay, you need to have something else to like scratch a different itch and then see how far you can go with that. And I've been guilty of that, over the last 3 or 4, maybe more years, where I've kind of gone like, okay, I've done that now. I need something else because I'm probably not going to get loads better in that. So let me try this.
Yeah, I was just thinking then, like, I'm speaking to a few people who have been in the gym for very specific reasons for a very long period of time. They always chase. In a way, progress could be just understanding that they don't need to do that anymore. Just thinking back to a couple of conversations I had recently, actually just turning up to the gym for purely an enjoyment standpoint. I turn up because I enjoy it. I know that it's good for me. I can take an hour out of my day. It's a bit of me time. It gives me some headspace. I'm a better person because of it. I don't need to be chasing the whole time. I think just that in itself can be progression, because you're not on that hamster wheel of something that, it just isn't maybe that important to you anymore. And I think it's sometimes quite weird for us to think about that. Like, it was initially weird for me to not train for rugby. Like, that was what I knew. But then changing that and having a completely different focus was one of the best things I ever did. So it's interesting.
Definitely.
So one of the things that I heard when I first started coaching as a one-to-one PT was new clients coming into me and them going, I want to lose weight and tone up. One of the first, I can't tell, if I had £1 for every time I heard it, I'd be doing all right. At that point, what's the first conversation you have with that person? Because there'll be a lot of people listening to this who have probably been in that boat. I want to lose weight and tone up. How do you start to get them on their journey? What things you start to look at? What conversations you start to have? What things should they be looking to kind of get out of the first, let's say, 3 months?
Yeah. I think so. Initially, I think whenever the tone up is it's an interesting word in our industry, because we all kind of go, oh, tone up. Actually, what that means is just building some muscle mass. And I know a lot of women specifically don't like the idea of building muscle because they think it's going to make them bulky. But actually, that is what toning up is. It's just having some definition so that when you do lose weight, you're not going to just look skinny, essentially. But then it's just about really looking at the rest of their life and what they're doing, because I think as well, sometimes when people start training at the gym, they almost think that's the answer, because they're like, I'm training now and I wasn't doing any training and I'm now training 3 to maybe 5 times a week. Why is my body not changing? I'm doing all this training, I'm putting on all this hard work. There's many other things that happen around that. You know, do you then think because you've trained that you can eat a little bit more and you maybe are a bit more hungry after a session, so that you go and eat more? There's many other things that exist around that, but I think you have to then take a little look at their lifestyle and their food and their expenditure outside of the gym as well. So use strength training to actually build some muscle mass, but then looking at nutrition, steps or expenditure that they're doing outside of here that can actually help them lose a little bit of weight.
I think gym wise, just kind of setting the goals and the expectations, as we mentioned, is being specific, number one. So I want to lose weight and tone up. Okay, well, probably what you're saying to me is that you don't just want to lose weight, you probably want to drop body fat. Probably. So that's the first thing. It's not just weight. You don't want to just see a number on the scale change. You actually want to drop body fat percentage. You want to increase, as you said, your muscle mass. But ultimately, where do you want to be? Is there a certain, jean size, dress size, whatever it is, shirt size that you want to be? Do you want to look a certain way? I think getting into the specifics straight away. I think the weight one / body fat is the biggest one for me. And obviously we do Acuniques and stuff here where we can actually kind of get into the nitty gritty of the body fat and the muscle mass, which is a really valuable tool. I think it can be sometimes focused on too much, but I think it's an extremely valuable tool for people to delve into. So I think that's the first one, is being specific about what it is that you actually want to do. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be body fat reduction, muscle mass increase. The measurable. So what things are you currently doing to measure your progress? And that's where the training diary comes in. So when you go into the gym, log what it is that you're doing. Not just, I did this movement. It could be, I did this movement for this amount of reps with this recovery time. It felt like this. Next week, I could maybe try this. And trying to understand the body, understand you, how you are in that environment, and just kind of giving yourself that nudge of progression so that you're kind of moving in the right direction. So that's like the M, A, attainable. So the attainable side, ideally if you can work with a coach would be ideal. Setting out the realistic goals, like what is realistic for me with my lifestyle. If I know I have an extremely busy job where I travel a lot, me trying to write a plan for myself that's 5 days a week is going to be just ridiculous. What works for me? And if you have a coach, they should be really taking that into account for you, trying to work with your lifestyle to find something that fits. And again, if you're right at the very start of your journey, you haven't got to be doing a great deal right away.
Yeah, definitely.
Just reduce the volume, focus on the quality of the sessions that you're in, and you can just build from there. But it has to be something that you're setting yourself up for success with. If I write 5 sessions out and I know for a fact I'm going to get into 2, straight away that's going to be a negative mindset for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to give up in the first 2-3 weeks.
I always like with that point as well, that especially when we have people for a consultation, I'm like, how many times a week do you think you can train?
Yeah.
And they're like, I reckon I could probably 5, maybe 6. And then you have to kind of get on realistically and almost ask them, what could they do on their worst week?
Yeah.
Like what's possible on your worst week? Like if everything's stressful, if you've got busy work week, family, what is actually realistic for you, and what's the minimum you'll be able to do? And you can always do more than that. But I think if you can consistently do those 2 sessions a week, then you're not then gonna if you're gonna say you're gonna do 4 or 5, and then you might have 2 weeks where you do nothing because it's all too much. So I think building from that is massive.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Yeah, the realistic point again when it comes to not just the amount of times that you can train, what you can do within that session, but just what that goal actually is going to be. So so we've identified now you want to drop some body fat, but realistically, how much do you want to drop? And again, I think this is where we get sold this big dream through social media that you're going to be able to do, you know, a ridiculous drop in body fat, put on a load of muscle mass in a really short time frame. Obviously, time frame being the last one of that SMART kind of goal process. I think people expect results far too quickly. And in that first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they've seen no change on the scale. Like, well, what's the point in this? They've overlooked the fact that actually they're eating better, just as a byproduct of them being more consistent in the gym. They're probably better at work because they're more alert, they're more vigilant, they're just putting more effort in. They might be spending more time at home. They might be getting to bed earlier, as you mentioned. Whatever it could be, don't just focus on the metrics of a scale. It might be actually that you've put on muscle mass in a certain, let's say 6 weeks, but that scale doesn't really show that. So it's specific to the measurement that you want to drop, not just weight, it's the body fat side, which is where the Acunique and stuff comes in. But I think a lot of it is placed on the time frame. I want to do X, but far too quickly. And I need to understand that actually it is a lifestyle change. With the TBT, guys and girls that we just had over 12 weeks, is a transformation process, but it's like the very first stage of that process. 12 weeks is a very short period of time, really. It's a case of, well, how can we help you set yourself up for success moving forward and get some really good kind of fundamentals and foundations in place that you can then move forward either on your own or still under the guidance of a coach that's going to let you take this to the next level.
Yeah, I think as well, when we got to the end of the TBT and we were asking, you know, a lot of them, how do they feel now at the end of it, and what was the biggest learning that they had off the back of it? And I think I was really pleasantly surprised by how many people were saying they almost had the tools now they could kind of go on and continue on their own. It was almost just the start of their journey. And I think there's so many short plans out there that, I mean, it's quite easy to get someone to just drop 10 kilos and, you know, look good for a photo in that time. And it's not easy, but you also don't know at that point. What I'm trying to say at that point is you don't see actually what else is going on in their life. So it could just be like, it could be really grueling and really awful for 6 weeks, and you just, you know, get them to go eat 1,200 calories and, you know, have no social life and all the rest of it. But then actually what happens after those 6 weeks? And actually, if you got a lot of those people, you know, 3 months down the line, what do they look the same as they did at the end of those 6 weeks? Probably not. Do they look worse? Maybe. Whereas I feel like with the TBT, 12 weeks, and also there was a lot of education in there as well. So there was enough time to start really building some good habits, but also getting them to really learn and understand what was required of them to get to where they needed to get to. So now that we've held their hand for 12 weeks, you know, quite a lot of them, some of them are staying on for another phase, but actually some of them feel like they actually want to go it alone for a bit, which is great. You want to empower people to be able to work towards their own goals, you know, on their own and be accountable to themselves. So I think that was a massive learning from TBT. And I think, the reason why we had so many great results.
Yeah, no, I agree. Completely agree. I think that going back into like the numbers and stuff, do you think it can be negative to just like look at numbers all the time? Do you think it's always positive to track numbers, or do you think it can be a negative?
Numbers in a sense of numbers on the scale, or like numbers in the gym, or
both? Do you think like those metrics, obviously we mentioned a lot about getting data down and metrics and having specifics. Do you think it's always positive, or do you think there can be a negative side to it?
There's definitely a negative side to it. I think it's a good thing to do consistently because, you know, like having numbers gives you a sense of what's going on, and it allows you to reflect and look back and where you want to go going forwards. However, a lot of people just focus on those numbers. I mean, weight on the scale is such a big thing for that. It is affected by so many things that if you literally just take the number on the scale that day and you go up, I mean, if you went out for a big meal the night before, if you're female in your menstrual cycle, if you're stressed and your cortisol, there's so many reasons why, you know, having not been to the toilet, like there's so many things that can affect that number on the scale that unless you know that, and because I think for me now, I've been in the game for a little while, I could step on the scale and it wouldn't bother me because I know that probably because I had a massive burger and chips and 4 glasses of wine the night before.
Sounds great.
But I think a lot of people take that out of their mind when they step on the scale, which I think is where the problems come in, because they go, I've been doing all this great work, and now what's happened? I haven't kept reducing my weight every time. And again, it's back to that linear thing. You know, you're not going to keep linearly dropping weight. I think looking at a weekly average is a really good way to kind of combat that, not seeing the changes every day, but seeing it as a weekly average, and is that going down? That's quite a good way to track it. But I think, yeah, that people can just get really fixated with numbers and really, you know, like, I have to be getting lower in weight, or I have to be going up in weights in the gym, but it's not realistic. But I think if you have a bit more education around the factors that can affect things, I think make you feel a bit more comfortable in looking at those numbers and what they actually mean.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what about, obviously we've mentioned the gym quite a lot for obvious reasons, but
we love it.
Yeah. But I think, you know, this all really ties in with, you know, it hasn't got to be in the gym. It hasn't got to be lifting weights. It hasn't got to be whatever it is within the four walls of a gym. It could just be, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, getting outside more. It might actually be just stepping outside of your comfort zone and joining a sports team or a club or whatever that may look like. Doing something that you just enjoy, that is physical, that's going to be a healthy change for you, something positive for you, whatever that might look like. It hasn't got to be in a gym. Maybe it is at some point, whatever. Maybe you've been in the gym for 10 years and actually it's your time to get out of the gym. You want to go and experience something completely different.
Yeah.
There's an element of, yes, there's structure, there's guidelines to this, but also I think it's really nice to take the shackles off sometimes and go, what do I want to do? What's going to just be fun for me for the next 2, 3 months, 6 months, year? And breaking that kind of just monotony sometimes can be just progression in itself. I don't think it always needs to be numbers. Doesn't always, because then straight away, if you enjoy something, and again back to enjoying the process, whatever that might look like, if you enjoy something, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to be probably more frequent with it, more consistent with it. You're going to put more effort into it. Just as an overall lifestyle thing, it's going to be better for you. You might get a mix of the two, I don't know, but I think ultimately when we think about progression, yes, the numbers do matter. Yes, it does matter to have something specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and a time frame there for a little bit of accountability. But ultimately, sometimes I think you need to take the pressure off. It can't just be pressure the whole time. There has to be an enjoyment element to it. There has to be something where you get up in the morning and go like, yeah, I want to go and do this today. And sometimes that won't happen. And that's where that kind of kick up the backside has to come in. If you have something specific you're going to work to, all right, you might need to have a word with yourself and get yourself into the gym. But I think sometimes people can understand that it doesn't always need to be that way. Just chill, enjoy, because then you might find something that reignites in you somewhere that actually now I really want to go and do this, rather than just flogging yourself all the time. Yeah, that makes sense.
Definitely, and that's kind of tied quite closely to burnout. I think when people have got loads going on in their life as well, and always striving for more and more and more in the gym, like that can be when you start to feel, because burnout isn't just from having sore muscles and feeling like you're on the brink of getting an injury. Mentally is a huge sign of that. Like, do you actually get up and feel like you want to go to the gym or play that sport that you play? I think the mental side of it is huge, and I think you're not always going to feel motivated to train, and that's where the whole discipline and stuff comes in. But I think you should, like you said, find enjoyment in the process and get up fit. You know, no one's making you come here. You should come here because you want to come here, and it should always feel like you're getting some sense of satisfaction from it. And I think if you're just always chasing, then you start to kind of go, oh, I don't know. When I was always, I don't run as much anymore, but when I used to run quite a bit, and before I understood the benefits of like slow running and, you know, recovery runs and things like that, I would always just go out and run hard. And I'd be like, I've got to do a 5K. I would have like anxiety before I went out, because it's like, oh, I've got to try and do it in this time, and every kilometre's got to be this split. And it's just so much pressure on yourself. And if you've got a busy life and busy job and you don't need that extra pressure, but you just weirdly put it on yourself sometimes. So I think, it is about taking a step back and having a look and seeing actually, are you getting pleasure from it still? Because it is really fun and it should be fun.
Because you actually started to run with no watch, right?
Yeah.
Just remove
no headphones and no Garmin. Just to run for fun for a little bit.
And did it make it more fun?
Definitely. I got no idea what my 5k time is at the moment, but I love it.
Right,
yeah. I know that I'm doing 5k because there's like a certain loop that I know is 5k, but I don't know. It could be any time, but I'm having a good time.
But that's the thing. So you're having a good time, but it might be something that in turn then just means that you go out and you just do it more.
Yeah.
So therefore you're probably more comfortable running. You're building in that kind of aerobic, whatever it is. Even if you don't get all sciencey about it, you're just out. You're enjoying yourself, you're running, you're more frequent with it. And my guess is you probably just feel better for it overall because, like you say, you're not stressing, there's no time constraints. I did it slower today, therefore I must be failing. None of that.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
So, we're going to finish things off. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
When you think about progression, give me 3 things. 3 of your top bits of advice for someone who's like, I'm in a rut, how do I find progression? What's your 3 bits of advice for them?
Find something that you can stick to. So something that you can do fairly frequently to be consistent with. Number 1 is like the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. If you're struggling to know about how to do it, where to turn, honestly invest in somebody, a coach, a friend that knows something about training, just to guide you along the way, I think can be really helpful. And then just making sure that the thing that you want to do is the thing that you actually want to do. Like, look at your why. Okay, I want to run this marathon, or I want to lift whatever in the gym. Is it actually what you want to do? And then if it is, great, crack on, keep building the consistent habits, invest in somebody that can help you do that.
Nice. Lastly, what's your goals for the rest of the year?
Oh God, training goals. I'm in like a stronger phase at the moment, I'd say. I think I came off the back of that 24-hour challenge, and I've done a few high roxes before that, which were great. But I think whenever I do a challenge like that, I kind of go, I just want to stop doing as much cardio and get a bit stronger. So
Nice.
No events planned, but that's the goal at the moment.
Just big deadlifts coming.
Exactly.
Looking forward to it. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
Ladies and gents, that is episode 3 in the books. If you liked it, found something useful in there, remember, like, subscribe, share it with someone if you think it might be useful for them as well. Episode 4 is just around the corner, and we look forward to seeing you soon.